Before I go any further, I'm going to have the official welcome by our Cahorlock and our colleague, Councillor Barbara. We're delighted to have you here today to officially welcome everybody, but particularly because you were a member of the steering committee and got so involved. Like all elected representatives across the country, there's a huge citizen-led approach for yourselves. You're at the heart of the community, and we're really, really delighted that you're here as Cahorlock, but also as a participant. So welcome, Barbara.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Catherine, and I'm delighted to welcome you back to Wexford. As Cahorlock of Wexford County Council, it's my pleasure to welcome you all today to this blended launch of the Wexford Telehealth Pilot Project. I'd like to give a special warm welcome to Minister Mary Butler, Minister of State for Mental Health and Older People at the Department of Health, who will officially launch our Wexford Telehealth Research Report today. Can I say firstly, as an elected member of Wexford County Council, it has truly been eye-opening to have sat on this telehealth project steering committee over the last 21 months or so. To see how various agencies and private enterprise come together and bring out the absolute best in each other, inspiring ideas and new ways of trying something to make this pilot project the very best it could be. We have all learned to have meetings online throughout the pandemic, but this innovative group had recognised before the pandemic hit that meeting online would be the best use of time and resources and make it possible to bring expertise to the table. And Catherine, who welcomes us all here today, made sure that this pilot project stayed on message to do the work it was set up to do with excellent results. I want to personally congratulate and thank each person who contributed to the project, especially the hard-working committee. I feel that this pilot has proven to be the way forward for managing health issues in the future. And in particular at this stage, I want to mention Paul Estrange and his support for the project at the very beginning. I want to welcome our speakers today. Our own Deputy Chief Executive, Tony Larkin, who will speak on how through collaboration we can achieve so much and break down the fear of using technology. Dr. Susan Deneef, Head of School of Humanities at Waterford Institute of Technology, who will give an overview on the telehealth project. James Doyle, Managing Director of Tunstall Emergency Response Limited, which just so happens to be in Bunclody, on how telehealth can change the way healthcare is delivered across our country. Kevin Malloy, the chairperson of Wexford Older People's Council, is sending a message. Unfortunately, Kevin's brother's funeral is taking place today and he's unable to be with us. And Derval Howley, Head of Health and Wellbeing, HSE CH05 area. And finally, we will have our official launch by Mary Butler TD, Minister for State at the Department of Health, followed by closing remarks from Catherine McGuigan, Chief Officer, Age Friendly Ireland. Elected representatives are hugely supportive of the Age Friendly programme in Ireland, in representing the interests of older citizens in our community. Around the country, many elected representatives support the National Age Friendly programme by sitting on age-friendly alliances, taking part in research and consultation, and participating in events such as walkability audits and championing local initiatives, of which thousands have rolled out over the past decade. With this telehealth project and many more projects relating to technology, we as elected representatives have a key role to play in referring citizens into the age-friendly programmes across our country to ensure information is shared and technology is made available and accessible to everyone who wishes to use it. In fact, on Wednesday, I was in Castlebridge at a technology project where through Age Friendly and the library service, older people were getting their certificates, having graduated in their technology program that they had been taking part in throughout the pandemic. And they were so pleased and so delighted with what they could now do with technology that they had previously been terrified of. A line taken from the research project that encapsulates this particular project for me is, a few people referred to a feeling that someone would be keeping an eye on them, resulting in peace of mind and a sense of being connected. The device helped relieve the anxiety that can occur when living with a chronic health condition. Now, doesn't that bring comfort? Not only to us, to the person who's using the technology, their families and their friends. That worry had been lifted. In conclusion, I want to acknowledge how delighted we are in Wexford County Council to be part of the telehealth project and to look forward to moving towards phase 2 in the very near future. Gaurav Mahadev.
Thank you, Cahorlach, and thanks for all your support to date. It's been wonderful. Our next speaker I'm going to welcome is my colleague, Deputy Chief Executive, Tony Larkin from Wexford County Council. Just before Tony comes up, we are sending apologies, Tony, on behalf of our Chief Executive this morning, Tom Enright, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. But I just wanted to make one note in terms of the executive in the County Council and their role. And there was key partners in this, obviously our HSE and the clinicians and funders. But central to anything like this is the reach of local government to citizens and the coordination role and function that they have. So without the leadership of Tom and his senior management team, the hard work of Paul Lestrange and Anne-Marie Laffin, this project would not have worked. And I think that's really, really important to note, that the local authority, having that vision to see that beyond the functions of local authorities, they see beyond that and look at things like the social determinants of health of our ageing population. So we're absolutely delighted with Wexford County Council being a part of phase 1 and looking forward to phase 2 as well, Tony. So welcome, Tony, please.
Right, thanks very much, Catherine. And as was just said there, I'd just like to start by just giving apologies for our Chief Executive, Tom Enright, who is unavoidably absent at the very last moment, and he asked me to stand in for him. But the words I'm going to speak today are directly from Tom, and any mistakes are entirely my own, right? But I'll blame him anyway, so that's all grand. Look, Cahorlach, Minister Mary Butler, other elected representatives and virtual guests, isn't a strange format now. We're here and we're not here and we're working in new ways. But in a funny kind of way, it's quite apt for the project we're actually launching today. You know, that we're learning to live in new ways, but it's not all negative. Some of it's very positive. It's a great pleasure for me to be here today representing Wexford County Council, albeit as a late substitute, but I am very pleased to be here. And I do know a lot of the people in the room and online, having worked with them over the years. I'm pleased to be here today at the launch of the telehealth project, which has been a collaboration between Wexford County Council, Age Friendly Ireland, the Health Service Executive and Tunstall Technologies, of course, a local Wexford company, under the expert guidance of Dr. Susan Deneve and her team at Waterford Institute of Technology. This telehealth pilot project was undertaken here in County Wexford in 2021. It was overseen by a multi-agency stakeholder group, which included Age Friendly Ireland, the Integrated Care Programme in the HSE, Wexford General Hospital, including consultant geriatrician and clinical nurse specialists, Tunstall Emergency Response, Wexford County Council Age Friendly Programme, including the Wexford Older People's Council, and our local elected representatives and councillors. The pilot project set out to provide a 12-week telehealth intervention to 50 patients with a chronic illness. The project was then independently evaluated by Waterford Institute of Technology. The joint departmental housing options for older people set out a clear objective of how assistive technology can support older people to age in place. Throughout the pandemic, the need for adaptive technology solutions has never been more important. Supporting the delivery of these technologies has been underpinned by government policy and will be a key enabler to inspiring the social determinants of health. I would like to take this opportunity to thank and acknowledge the commitment shown by the HSE from the clinicians, including Dr. Etna Harkin, Niall Kennedy and Cara Murphy at Wexford General Hospital, as well as the management and staff of Tunstall Technologies in Bunclody. Tunstall are leaders in the area of digital health and care services, and it is great to see a local company as a key player in the telehealth market. Thank you, Dr. Susan Deneve, who produced this compelling research that shows how, through collaboration, we can address the medical needs of our growing aging population. And I'm soon to be one of them, so I definitely encourage as much of that as possible. I would also like to thank Kevin Malloy, Chairperson of Wexford Older People's Council, for his valuable time and contribution. And just a personal note, Kevin and I soldiered quite a bit in the community development field in years gone by, and I'd been looking forward to meeting him here today, and I just heard of his sad bereavement, so my personal sympathies to him. But I know there is no greater servant of the community sector in Wexford than Kevin, and it's a pity he's not here today. And look, last but not least, the participants who actually took part in this World Pilot Project need to be remembered as well. Their contribution was, of course, the invaluable one. Something to reflect on. While going through the research paper, it struck me, by which I mean Tom Enright, of course, but it struck me that monitored throughout the process and how, it struck me how the participants were monitored throughout the process and how their confidence grew as time went on. And I quote, post the intervention, almost all participants, that's 97%, reported they would still be happy to use the devices, and almost 80% reported they had found the devices very helpful in managing their illness. Using the device had changed the opinion of technology of over 40% of participants, and the key changes reported included increasing confidence when using technology and using more technology. This indeed bodes well for our future with technology. I am delighted Wexford County Council is actively engaged in working with Age Friendly Ireland through our own Age Friendly office here in Wexford with Anne-Marie Laffin to address the emerging needs that this report is highlighting here today. And I look forward to the next phase of the project. And going off script, I was talking to the Chief Executive last night about it, and I know he's personally enormously supportive of this, and our full support will be given to phase 2 and any subsequent work on it. And we look for other ways to expand the reach of the programme into other services we're providing. So with that, I'll conclude my speech, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Executive Tony. That was great and just unfortunate that Tom couldn't be with us today. But again, thanks to him and Cathaoirleach for everybody in Wexford County Council's support. So I suppose key to any, we talk about pilots and pilots ending and maybe not being mainstreamed. And I've always had a vision that if we do something and it works well, we should scale it up and replicate it. It has been on that foundation that the Age Friendly programme has grown over the last, we're in our 12th year now, and rolled out many initiatives that have been scaled up. So when we started looking at this and when this idea had been born to us, I suppose from Paul Lestrange and the older people, and the fact that we had a fantastic opportunity with Tunstall, when those ideas started to emerge, it was my vision that we would try to scale this up, that we would do something that would really change the way in which we would meet the vision of sláinte care. And in the basis of that, my experience is always having an academic evaluation, because when somebody comes in and independently tells you that something is working well, and they'll also tell you when it's not working well, and that's the beauty of it. So we were delighted when Waterford Institute of Technology came in, and even more delighted when Dr. Suzanne Deneve was brought in. Being a nurse by background herself, has definitely contributed to this project. So to give you an overview of what we've achieved in phase 1, I welcome my colleague and friend, Dr. Suzanne.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to be here today presenting the results of this pilot study, and thank you, Catherine, for that introduction. So just to give you an overview of the research study that was undertaken, the design and methodology used, and some of the key findings. That's what this short presentation is setting out to do. So just to give you the project context, it's well known that aging is associated with an increased prevalence of chronic conditions with impacts on mortality, morbidity, and quality of life. And the challenges facing older adults living with chronic conditions during COVID, fear and loneliness and cut off from their normal supports, created an impetus to look at how we can best meet older adults living with chronic healthcare conditions needs using technology. So then what was this telehealth intervention that was put in place? Okay. The Tunstall technology was provided to older adults with one of 3 chronic health conditions: diabetes, chronic heart failure, and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. And these were older adults who were living in their own homes out in the community. The technology used in the pilot intervention had been used elsewhere, but it's the first time being used in the Irish healthcare context for older adults. So what did it involve? So what is then telehealth? Normally in healthcare, there is a relationship between the patient and the doctor. In this intervention, I'm sorry, the slide is jamming. Yeah. So in this intervention, you had both the patient and the clinician and the telehealth Tunstall technology. The clinicians the 3 clinicians were recruited, as outlined earlier by one of the speakers. The pilot set out to recruit 50 patients. The clinicians identified these patients who met inclusion criteria, patients over the age of 65 diagnosed with one of the 3 conditions, and invited them to take part in the study. And once the patients had consented to take part, Tunstall were provided with the patient's contact details and delivered and set up and trained the participants to use the technology. Over the course of 6 months, 50 patients were recruited, but 32 completed the full 12 weeks of the intervention. And further details on these participants will be given later in this presentation. Clinicians were also asked to keep a record of the patients that they had considered for the intervention, but who were not recruited. The research team were provided with these records, and the most common reasons for patients not being recruited were poor literacy levels, poor technology capability, or poor or no supports at home to use the technology, or the patients declined because they weren't interested. So 32 patients used the technology for the 12 weeks. The patients were given the necessary equipment to monitor their health condition. That could have been a weighing scales or a thermometer or a blood pressure machine. And they were also given a tablet, which was preloaded with technology, the My Mobile Patient app. And every day they logged onto that technology, onto the app. They took their reading, it might have been their blood pressure, and the reading was transmitted from the medical device to the technology, to the tablet, into Tunstall operator. The Tunstall operator could then see the patient's readings coming in, and they could identify if a reading had been missed or if equipment didn't seem to be working. This information then was also fed to the clinician. And the clinician system was the clinical triage manager system. And this operated on a traffic light system where alerts could be raised. So if it was a red alert, it was more critical perhaps than a green alert. The clinicians could monitor these readings daily and then intervene if necessary. The clinician could also track and trend and see how the patient was doing over time and could get a summary report of the patient's condition. So what then was the project aim and objectives? Well, the overall aim of this telehealth intervention was to keep older adults living with a chronic health condition well in their own homes and improve the self-management of their condition. The research project objectives were to assess the impact of the remote patient monitoring service on disease management and patient well-being, to explore the patient's views and experiences of using the remote patient monitoring intervention on their health service utilization, their housing, health and well-being. We also wanted to get the clinicians' views of the intervention and the impacts of the intervention. And finally, to make recommendations for phase 2 of the study. So how then was the evaluation carried out? It was carried out in 3 phases. So before the intervention, the referring clinician provided information on the patient, and we also interviewed the patients to see what did they think or expect from the intervention. The patients then took part in the 12-week intervention, and they monitored their readings daily. We also interviewed the patients midway through to see how they were getting on. And we were also able to use the reading information coming from the devices to see what was happening with the devices and what type of readings were being collected, what type of alerts. After the intervention, we again interviewed the patients about their experiences, and we interviewed the clinicians involved. So the data we had for the evaluation was in two forms: qualitative from the interviews and quantitative. The quantitative data we had was their socio-demographic information, their views of their health condition, their views of the condition management, their views of using the technology, and we also had the device from the monitoring system. So just to give you a flavour of the participants who took part. So of the 32 participants, 88% of them were male. In relation to their ages ranged from, one patient was 56, but that was just an outlier. Most of the patients were in the range of 71 to 96. In relation to their education level, 66% had completed primary and secondary school. 79% owned their own home. And in relation to their living alone, 30% of them lived alone. And finally, I'm sorry, the slide is jamming a little. Finally, 53% of the patients suffered from chronic heart failure, 38% had COPD, and 9% had diabetes. It's a little bit slow. Oh, sorry. Well, that would help, apologies. So in relation to the evaluation, I'm going to present the findings in relation to the stay left, shift left template as used by the Digital Transformation HSE. So I'm going to look at how the intervention impacted on quality of care, quality of life, the clinician experience, and cost reduction. So in relation to quality of care, we looked at how the device, how the people viewed the impact of the intervention on their health condition, their illness management, their health service use, and their readings. Apologies. So in relation to the perceptions of health condition, before the intervention, most of the participants had perceived their condition as somewhat stable or very stable. By the end of the intervention, 64% had noticed changes in their readings during the intervention. 14% had felt the need to contact the health service in relation to their readings. In relation to the perception of condition management, what was very interesting here was the number of participants who felt that the intervention had really improved their condition management. 64% had noticed changes in their readings during the intervention, and 14% had felt the need to contact the clinician during the intervention. In relation to the perceptions of illness management, the device was seen as giving them assistance. It created a structure and was a source of information to the patients. I do apologize for the device. The sticker is really very sorry about this. Yeah, it's not quite. Okay, so it creates, so the perceptions of, so in relation to their healthcare service, the participants felt it improved their access to their health system. It improved communication and experience. It was a very convenient and efficient system. They felt it reduced their need to attend clinicians. They had fewer appointments needed, and it reduced their footfall. And they felt that the clinicians listened to them because the patients now knew more about their condition. So next slide. So in relation to the monitoring system, what was really interesting was the extent to which the participants engaged. Only 2.6% of daily readings were missed. The alerts were picked up from the devices rather than the patient health interviews. Every patient had at least one alert raised, and over the course of the 12 weeks, 932 alerts were recorded. In relation to the impacts of the telehealth intervention on quality of life, next slide, Catherine, sorry. They really felt it improved their quality of life. It increased their confidence in managing the condition. They felt more connected and had a greater sense of security. They were watching their diet more, as one person said. They were more aware of their health, and they were more able to try different things because they felt more confident in their health. Okay. Okay, so in relation to the next slide, what you see here is the patient's perceptions of the technology. It's really striking. 91% of participants were very happy to use the device. 94% of them reported themselves as being very capable of using the device. And while 45% of them had experienced issues, they felt that the Tunstall had given them excellent support in addressing any of the issues that arose. And 42% of the participants would change or add something to the device. Now, this is a very interesting finding because what the things they wanted to change or add are actually things that the technology is very capable of doing. It is within the functionality of the Tunstall equipment and will be utilised in phase 2. The participants reported that the technology had a very simple interface, and while there were some reliability issues, these were easily addressed. And the participants felt that it had great application to them, and with system refinements would be even more useful to them in managing their illnesses. Yeah. Next. So I'm moving now to the clinicians' views of the intervention and what they said about the intervention. So overall, the clinicians were very much in favour of telehealth and believed that the telemonitoring technology used in the pilot study worked very well. The telehealth intervention fitted well with the condition-specific clinical teams. They felt there needed to be flexibility in relation to the duration of the intervention, and there was a need to tailor the intervention to the patient's need. And that could be integrated extremely well within a self-management plan for a patient. The alert system, the summary system, and the track and trend, if it was in place, worked very well. And the next phase needs to consider cover, perhaps, for when the clinicians may be on leave or unavailable. What was very evident was that the full capability of the technology hadn't been utilised in the pilot study, and therefore is something that's highly recommended for phase 2. The ability of these older adults to use technology was very good. Those who took part were very well able to manage the technology. And in the future phase, we would look at ways of perhaps supporting older adults who mightn't perhaps have engaged, but who now might, as a result of this pilot study, be perhaps more inclined to engage with the technology. The clinicians spoke, however, about how factors such as COVID and the HSE cyber attack had impacted on the pilot, but overall didn't impact on the overall intervention. Looking at cost, the cost of delivering the 12-week intervention to each patient was $2,155. This included all the equipment costs, all the clinician costs associated with delivering the intervention. So as an intervention, it is a very cost-effective intervention. International research strongly supports the rationale that remote monitoring is cost-saving for health services. We would like to examine this in phase 2 to see the impact of cost reduction in phase 2. Okay. So in summary, this was a collaborative project between Tunstall, the HSE Integrated Care Programme for Older Persons, Health and Wellbeing, Age Friendly Ireland, Wexford County Council and Wexford Older Persons Council. So as a collaborative project, the pilot study showed that the intervention had worked extremely well, that the remote monitoring for patients with COPD, CHF and diabetes for 12 weeks via the My Mobile Patient app and the Clinical Triage Manager system had worked very well. Patients had been very pleased with the intervention, had felt it really benefited them. In phase 2, there will be minor modifications made to enhance the suitability and impact of the solution to the HSE. So the Tunstall Telehealth Pilot Project, WIT, were very pleased to have been invited to evaluate it. We really welcome such opportunities to work with partners and to show through research the value of interventions. And I want to say thank you to all the patients who took part for giving their time, and to thank the steering committee because it was with their direction and support that the pilot study was undertaken. And I want to thank the research team from WIT. It was far from a solo effort. I might be here presenting, but I'm presenting on their behalf. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Suzanne. And the irony is not lost on me that we're doing a virtual launch and your clicker gave up when we were doing a technology, which is always the way. But thankfully, all of those things were safeguarded against in our pilot. So thank you for that, Suzanne. A fantastic overview. And it's interesting that it worked out around 2,500 or 2,000 for the intervention over a 12-week period to help somebody, you know, manage their condition and, you know, with hospital avoidance and ED avoidance. And we know the cost of even one overnight stay in an emergency department or in a hospital can be, you know, above 1,000. So it just shows you the cost effectiveness. And we will focus more on that and the learnings from that in phase 2. So as both my colleagues in Wexford County Council have alluded to, unfortunately, Kevin can't be here today. We're really sorry that he can't be here for a couple of reasons. Everything that we do in age-friendly programme, it was one of our critical success factors, is that older people have a voice. They help to co-design the solutions and they participate in everything. So rather than us just be a bunch of public servants or service providers sitting around deciding what's right for older people, they're designed. And I'm delighted that our alliances across the country, our officials and our partners in the department have listened to that voice when they can and when budgets allow and when we can retailer budgets to deliver things in an age-friendly way. So for that purpose, the OPC at local level is a critical success factor in the delivery of the age-friendly programme. Not only is Kevin chair of the Wexford Older People's Council, he's also vice chair of the National Network of Older People's Councils. And when he was on this steering committee, he brought a very pragmatic voice to the table about the real concerns. He's participated in all of our walkabilities, helped to implement projects, but he really had a very practical voice, and sometimes he unearthed the real challenges that people feel, whether it's transport issues, living in rurality, broadband issues, I suppose literacy issues, and from early school leavers and all of those things that really needed to be considered. So it's unfortunate he couldn't be here today, but he wanted to send the message that to be part of this is really important to older people. And I think I'd like to tell you just a very quick, nice story about Kevin. Kevin's career was in the P&T, as they called it in this country. And during the pandemic, older people were disproportionately affected, as we know, by being asked to stay at home. But there were some challenges in terms of telecommunications, landline going down, you know, panic buttons stopping to work because of the landline being down and not being able to get through to phone numbers and so forth. So through a process, Age Friendly Ireland engaged with the communication regulator, and we spoke to all the telecoms companies, and we're delighted that they've all come on board and they want to retailer their services, but particularly Air, who just launched last week a dedicated telephone line, and it's called the 2 clicks. So if you're over 65, you dial the telephone number, you put in your phone number, and then you get an option 1. Is it a technical fault? Or option 2? And is it, anything else? And you can get through and you can speak to a person. So this is the type of services that people have asked for, that they get through. They're not left hanging for ages. But in honor of Kevin's role on that group that helped to co-design that service, and given his career with P&T, Air have asked Kevin to be the voice. So when you ring through and it tells you to press 1 or 2, it's Kevin Malloy's voice. So I think that's a real bula bus moment here for us here in Wexford to acknowledge his role. So thank you, Kevin. So my next speaker is our colleague Doyle Howley from the HSE. The participants in the HSE, apart from being core funders to this programme, but we had our geriatrician, Ethna Harkin, our CNSs, Cara and Neil, who were contributing so much to the actual clinical triage element of this. We had the integrated care programme at national level and local level, Derval in CHO Area 5, Kate Colleen, a number of other colleagues who all participated and are very excited about this managed service, this end-to-end solution that will provide an intervention and support people to live at home. So I know, Derval, that she's very keen to look at phase 2 and the wider scale up of that, and just delighted to hear your support for that today and your support in general. And I will say one of the findings from the report was that older people, when the intervention was taken away, that they said they would love to have some more technology in the house, be it telecare. And Derval has very kindly contributed to older people having some supportive technology following that trial, which is great for them, those that participated. So I welcome Derval Howley, please.
Just to say thanks a million to Catherine for the warm welcome, and delighted to be here today to talk about the next steps of a really exciting programme. The initiative, and it's been talked about earlier, has really been based on multi-agency and partnership working. The e-health itself, it's very much focused at self-management, which is at its core. This supports people, and Tony mentioned earlier the word confidence. It gives people with long-term chronic conditions confidence and also competence in terms of managing their own health. And we all know information is power. And what this project has been shown to do is to be able to give individuals information in relation to their own health condition so that they can make informed decisions. So a really, really strong focus there on supporting people to self-manage. You've heard that the concept started, and it started not with the HSE, it started with Wexford County Council, working strongly with National Age Friendly and with Anne-Marie Laffin in terms of Wexford Age Friendly, Wexford Older Persons Council, and our colleagues in terms of the HSE in Wexford General Hospital, and Dr. Ethna Harkin and Niall and Cara have been mentioned there, but very much through that collaborative working, bringing the project to life. We're ready now, I suppose, in terms of to take on the baton for phase 2 of the project, which will be the expansion from a Wexford project to a project right across the southeast. And for us, that's Wexford, Waterford, Carlow, Kilkenny and South Tipperary. The first step is an important one, and it's the agreement of funding. And we had Des Mulligan from ICPOP speaking to our CEO and to our management team during the week to assure us that that business plan is very much up there with National HSE. We've also then looked in terms of local contribution, so it would be very much a partnership approach. And as Catherine mentioned from the HSE, we're looking to support the purchase of some digital technology that will support those that have been through the programme. There's very much buy-in in terms of the health service from senior management. I'm here today with 2 hats on because I'm acting for Kate Colleen White, but also as a head of service. Just to thank Suzanne, who joined us. She's just spoken earlier on the presentation of the findings, and she gave those findings and joined us for a discussion in terms of next steps with our chief officer and the rest of my colleagues in terms of the senior management team. As with all good projects, we won't be starting phase 2 in terms of from ground zero. There's been loads of learning from the programme. Suzanne has outlined all of that kind of rich detail and feedback from both service users, from clinicians, and indeed from the steering group and that multi-agency approach. So we're in a really fortunate position to learn from this as we go into phase 2. Where the focus in terms of the pilot, it focused on an acute setting. So it focused on trialling this within the acute hospital in Wexford General. For the phase 2, we'll be looking at a community focus. So we've agreed in terms of working with Des Mulligan on the national ICPOP, which is our integrated care programme for older persons, that he'll be working with us to look at this and how do we trial it and how do we pilot it and build on the first phase, but out in a community setting. We have a new head of service for older persons, Helen McDade, and unfortunately she isn't able to join us today, but she's very excited in terms of this being a new role for her and coming with this new innovative phase 2 of a pilot. We're also, in terms of the HSE, we're in the process of recruiting a regional general manager for e-health. So this is a really new place for us to be as a health service. And it's exciting that we have something, a ready project to go that will gather and be given support from that new regional general manager as well. COVID has made life quite difficult for the last 2 years, but our silver lining has been, and Barbara, you mentioned that this was kind of innovative just before COVID as well, but for us, it's opened our eyes to e-health, certainly our silver lining. The silver lining has been the enhancement of partnership, because we've really worked together and collaboratively right across all of the different agencies, both the public sector, the private sector, and the community and voluntary sector, in a way that we haven't ever done before, I think, pre-COVID. It's also brought in line in terms of Healthy Ireland, and I'll end on my Healthy Ireland principles, which is health is everybody's business. And if this project is anything, it is showing us that the health service can't do it alone, that it is health being everybody's business. We look forward then to work with all of you in terms of this very, very innovative way to look at how can we improve the population and each individual's health within the Southeast. So just to say thanks a million to all of those that have worked so hard in terms of pilot and phase 1, and we look forward to working with you in phase 2. Thanks a million.
Thank you, Derval, and particularly thank all your colleagues in CHO5 who have been so participatory. We know nobody's had an easy time in the pandemic, but particularly our HSE, between cyber attacks, been under pressure, and particularly our frontline workers. So I just want to acknowledge the role of the HSE in supporting people over what's been a very difficult time. So another colleague from the HSE at national level is our colleague, Professor Martin Curley. I nearly called you Dr. Martin there. I was giving you another title. So Martin heads up the Digital Transformation Board, which is no mean feat because the landscape of assistive technologies pre-COVID, but since that, in terms of our adaptability, has never been more important. And it's very complex, whether we're talking about internal systems, external systems, or adaptive technologies for people. So we're delighted to be working with Martin as a partner, as a co-funder, but as a learner in terms of how this telehealth project can become an exemplar when it's phased up and potentially reach a national scale. So Martin, we're delighted to have you here today to talk about the digital strategy for the HSE, and you're very welcome.
Catherine Coherlock, what a privilege it is to be here, and I'm joined by my colleague Jim McGrain, who's our Living Labs lead. I think we're living in a remarkable time. I think it's going to be a privilege for us all. We're about to witness dramatic transformation of the whole paradigm of health. Over the last 100 years, something remarkable has happened. We've added about 25 to 30 years in terms of average lifespan. And they were through two different interventions. The first intervention, probably from the start of the 1900s, was public health. And then after that, probably 40, 50 years later, came clinical care. And we're starting to exhaust, actually, the returns from that. But when we think about, and Catherine, you mentioned this earlier, the social determinants of health, clinical care actually only accounts for 10% of the health outcomes. So we're about to enter this new era of dramatic, really dramatic change. And if I can tell you about a couple of the meetings I had on my way down here, early in the morning, we met with the Mater Hospital and we're introducing mobile ultrasound. And for the first thing that's going to do is, some of you may have had trouble getting a cannula put in your arm, and this is going to make sure the first time it's tried, it's done accurately. But this is a whole new platform. And the makers of this type of technology is a company called Butterfly. It costs 10 times less than the cheapest ultrasound, but it's going to completely eradicate the stethoscope. So you can describe the stethoscope as you listen and you guess. This new ultrasound technology will allow you to look and actually see what's going on. I then met with Barry Lowry, who's our government CIO, and I'll share our Leapfrog strategy in a second, but we got completely aligned around the personal health record. So one of the biggest issues we have fragments of electronic data on our health all over the place. And in the future, every citizen will have a patient health record. Met with Ken McDonald, who's the national clinical lead for cardiology. And we have 6, 7 very exciting interventions that are already underway or planned. One of the ones I particularly like is a cardio mobile device. It sells for €150, but it can give you a 6-lead ECG in 30 seconds, which is as good as an ECG that takes 10 minutes. You need a skilled operator in jail. So there's lots of changes. We're meeting, Derval, with some of your colleagues later on this afternoon, Helen Keeley and Philip Crowley, and we have an agreement with the world's largest technology brand and technology company to run a national program around health well-being and safety. We have another meeting this afternoon around a company that's providing mobile X-ray service. So, and we've had a very successful pilot. I would have to say the most exciting project that we'll work on today is the project we're about to talk about. And I'm so pleased that, you know, Catherine, you found a place at the table for us. And, you know, we've been working with Suzanne and a brilliant evaluation that we will actually take this process and roll into lots of our other living labs. So just to mention, healthcare is a decade behind most other industries in terms of digitalizing. We think about banking, we think about music, we think about you know, retail and so on. But that's about to change. But Ireland is far behind in terms of the adoption of digital. This is data from OECD. We're fourth last in terms of electronic health records. But we're even worse in terms of telehealth. We're joint last in Europe with Serbia and Romania based on last year's data. So we're way behind, but that's good news because we have a massive opportunity. And what we want to do is leapfrog. We have all these disruptive technologies showing up. We have cloud, we have mobile, we have artificial intelligence, we have blockchain. And what we want to try and do is to use these technologies to move Ireland way ahead. So what we proposed to the HSE board about 4 months ago was a leapfrog strategy. So we could go from the left of this chart where our system is paper-based, it's presence-based, and it's mainly focused on the acute hospitals. We're actually going to leap to a new model, which is home-based and community-based. That's remote monitoring. It's about predictive health, you know, open source, integrated, and so on. And I think this project actually is a brilliant exemplar of that. And we have about 50 living labs, but this is probably close to the closest to the essence of what we want to do. So we're so pleased to see the results and to participate and help co-fund in a small way the next phase. And we think the overall cost of this solution actually will be significantly less. If you look at our overall spend, we have been growing every year with our HSE budget. But interesting enough, if you look at our health budget as a percentage of GDP, it's actually decreasing. So there's something interesting in that as well. We're building a capability maturity framework with Maynooth University and some SMEs and some big companies like Roche and Medtronic and Huawei and Cisco. And we're actually able to measure, or will be able to measure actually how well we're improving. And right now we're somewhere between level 1 and level 2. And our goal is to be if not the European digital health leader by 2025. And I think we can do that. We're using a bleeding edge methodology called Open Innovation 2.0. And the goal of that methodology is to actually achieve sustainable, intelligent living. You know, and I think as Derval said, you know, health is everybody's business. It's the one thing that concerns us all. And I think by working together, some of you may have heard of the idea of quadruple helix innovation, where you have government, industry, academia, and patients and citizens working together. And this project is another exemplar of that. So the project will use the clinicians' feedback, but most importantly, the patient's feedback to improve the next version. So our overall agenda, we call it Stay Left, Shift Left. It's you know, Sláintecare is a very good policy. It's hundreds of pages long. I don't have the patience to read that, but we describe that as Stay Left, Shift Left. And Stay Left is about keeping people well in their homes, or if you happen to have a chronic condition, you can be managed best of all from home. And Shift Left is about moving patients as quickly as possible from an acute to community and to a home setting. And this project, this living lab, addresses both of these, particularly managing patients from home that have chronic conditions and actually improving their health, but will also facilitate early discharge from hospitals if we can move forward with it. You know, we've been working with Suzanne and Catherine in terms of evaluating every time we make a digital intervention. We're looking for 4 benefits. So we're looking for improvement in care, improvement in quality of life, improvement in the clinician and patient experience. And lastly, we'd either like to see a cost reduction or value. I just did a quick calculation there, and this service costs about 25 euros per day to provide. It's amazing. We did a major study with the Department of Health on, we have a virtual respiratory ward. We have about 850 patients being monitored from home, and the data shows the cost of running that is about 88 euros a day. But that's 1/10 of the cost of having somebody in hospital, about 880 euros a day. But this project actually has gone even further. It's a quarter of the virtual respiratory ward. And I would like to acknowledge James and Tunstall for their role, because they're proving a whole new model here that potentially could be scalable across the country. And last week, we announced a new collaboration with Enterprise Ireland. We had Leo Clancy, the CEO, announce this at our Digital Academy Forum in Tullamore. And we're going to work much more closely with Enterprise Ireland to help Irish companies scale. So we have a network of living labs. These are all around the country. We announced the Central Digital Health Innovation Lab in Tullamore last week. Well, we have some amazing collaborations going on in places you mightn't expect. So in Letterkenny, we have two remarkable projects, and we happen to be in Cork on Friday. And we were looking at data from patients in Letterkenny who live an hour and a half, from the hospital, and we're able to look at their live respiratory streams. So these are patients with COPD that might be hospitalized 4 or 5 times a year, but we could immediately distinguish from the patterns which patients were doing well and which patients needed an intervention. So we'll hope to be able to dramatically reduce the number of hospitalizations. Wexford is the main living lab in the southeast, and it's brilliant to have the partnership with WIT. And I think there is a real clear path for this lab and this solution to go from Wexford to the next phase, but then go as a national solution. I think that will be a fantastic accomplishment. Want to mention one other lab is a heart failure lab we've been running with Centric Health and Roche. We've had 100 patients who've been monitored for 6 months, and normally we would have expected about 40 hospitalization. Each hospitalization lasts for about 10 to 12 days, costs about 14,000 euros, and obviously there's a lot of pain and for the patient and trauma, but we've just had 1 hospitalization in 6 months. And that's because the patient that was deteriorating didn't take the new prescription. So there's so much potential. Just to finish, digital offers the promise of, we have an unsustainable system, but digital allows us to do things 10 times better or 10 times cheaper or 10 times faster or at 10 times the volume. And I think the solution here is 10 times cheaper than having a patient in hospital, and actually has other benefits. So we've been learning about how to deploy this, but I wanted to just finish with a page from Suzanne and Catherine's report, and it is the patients, it's the patient feedback. And I thought some of these comments were really remarkable, and the level of patient engagement, just 2% of the readings were missed. People feeling more comfortable, more confident, and actually having better outcomes. So I'll leave you read those comments, but this is what it's about. And if nothing else was delivered except this, it would have been a very successful project, but it's delivered far more. So congratulations to Catherine, to Wexford County Council, and Suzanne and James. Brilliant project. We certainly want to see how we can fast track and go into this broad demonstrator and build a business case. And it doesn't take an accountant to figure out there actually is a really compelling business case to do that nationally. And we'll continue to work with Derville and other HSE colleagues to see how we really move forward and ultimately go to broad adoption. So thanks, Catherine. It's been a privilege to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Likewise, we're delighted to be part of the Living Laboratory across the country. And I think it's lost on us as well, the opportunity here for economic development, for, creative designers, for great jobs, for, all of those. And particularly, I know Wexford County Council are very devoted to growing economic development, as are every county in the country. So if we can grow our own Indigenous industries by providing opportunities for commercialization of services. This really speaks to this. So it's a holistic project from that perspective, and I'm delighted you highlighted it. On a personal note, I can't begin to tell you how delighted and excited I am about that cannula. As a person with very poor veins, Martin, and maybe every other woman in the country, I can't wait to get it right first time. So I'll be keeping my eye out for that one, Martin. So thank you very much. We wouldn't have been able to deliver this project without our partners in Tunstall. Apart from obviously their contribution to the programme and their service. It has been really, really great to work with an organisation, a long-standing business in Wexford, a very proud employing Wexford people and many, many others. And we were delighted to work in partnership with Tunstall. They're a multinational, I suppose, but a very, very strong Irish base in the provision of telecare and now telehealth. So it has been absolutely wonderful as part of this project to work with James and the team and look at all the innovative solutions. And in that regard, I'm going to welcome the Managing Director, James Doyle, to say his piece. Thank you, James.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Minister Cathaoirleach, Deputy CEO, other dignitaries. It is an absolute privilege for myself to be here to represent our company today. I suppose from a personal perspective, it's the culmination of what Professor Curley says is probably a decade-long journey. I first engaged with telehealth discussions probably 9-10 years ago. And maybe it does take us a decade to prove the concept to ourselves. So I'm completely in agreement. What I can say is, I suppose, in a world that we're dominated now by COVID and have been for the last 2 years, and a negative kind of rhetoric that it brings, it's so refreshing to see something positive and a good news story for us to be able to tell. And I think that's what this report represents. But as always, that wouldn't have been possible without some people stepping up to the plate, namely Catherine McGuigan, Paul Lestrange, Des Mulligan, Anne-Marie Laff and Louise Edmonds. These are the people that made the project the success that it is. And obviously the patients. So our supporting role for what it was obviously hugely important. And if I'm being perfectly honest, there were days I was wondering what were we doing in terms of the challenges it presented. Because obviously we had to completely reconfigure how we did our installations, our maintenance, our support. And that was a huge learning, one of a number of huge learnings we took from the project. I suppose by means of introduction, our business as the Cathaoirleach referred to is based in Bunclody. We're very proud to be based in Wexford, and hence we're obviously extremely proud to be part of the project. We currently have 50,000 telecare subscribers around the country, so we have a national footprint. We would receive approximately 750,000 calls per annum. And that's a significant engagement with our client base. So obviously that will be from what we call a frequent flyer to people who might only use our service once every year when they absolutely need it. It is, I suppose, we've always viewed, and why I was passionate about telehealth in particular is I've always viewed it as the future of our business. It's so refreshing, it's so positive to hear Professor Curley speak about the future and the roadmap and Derval's engagement here from CHO5. We have craved this, and I'll be frank with you, from other engagements I've had with CEOs of our other business around the world, they would crave the audience I have here today. So I'm eternally grateful for that opportunity. I suppose telehealth, what is telehealth? Suzanne has captured what it looks like and how it operates, but I suppose traditionally we refer to now, I suppose, remote patient monitoring is actually what the term we would really use. Telehealth is the distribution of health-related services and information. So that's a critical piece. So the critical thing being that you remain GDPR compliant, that the patient is always first. But without the clinical engagement, this would not have worked. There's two particular strands to our service and our device, shall we say. The first being a My Mobile app. That's specifically designed for the patient, and it enables them to self-manage and monitor. Okay, so effectively the app collects data on that tablet from devices such as pulse oximeters, which will give you your oxygen levels, to blood pressure, to weight, to a number of different readings. And this can be deployed not only for chronic conditions, but a recent deployment in the UK has been for underage, under 16s with eating disorders. So it's the monitoring element, and the triage is, I suppose, what sets the service apart. The clinical triage manager is then the clinician's tool. It's a management software platform which allows them to monitor patients remotely. And as Suzanne rightly pointed out, it's a traffic light system. So for simplicity, it's a green, amber, red. Red is obviously you are in trouble. Amber means indicatively, we would have had to technically triage the person again to say we need you to take another reading possibly. But typically green, amber, red is pretty self-explanatory. I think one of the standout figures for me was the 2.4% misreadings, and they predominantly relate to patients forgetting to take a reading. They may have had a hospital appointment, they may have some other commitment, but that's typically what it was. The response of the people on a project was fantastic. I suppose, as previous speakers have mentioned, I think we are at a defining moment in terms of delivery of services for older people with chronic conditions. I suppose this is really a snapshot of what future delivery of services can look like. And I suppose that's what really excites me, to be frank. What is very evident to me as well from speaking to some of the people on this project, from speaking to my own staff, is that people want information. They want data about their condition. To be honest, some of the people we spoke to, I suppose, with a preconceived notion of what they would have been like prior to the engagement on the project, I would have felt they may not have wanted it, but it allowed them to go up and walk. And bear in mind, we were engaged here against a backdrop of 2K restriction, 5K restriction, and all that went with all that. So in our client base, we have seen a deterioration of some people with conditions that weren't fortunate enough to be part of this project. So I think this really can't be understated. As Professor Curley says, I mean, the development of technology is ongoing at a rate of knots, and it's fantastic to see. I suppose we get new innovations brought to us kind of every week. Critically, the older person predominantly needs to remain at the center of the development, or any development. Ease of use, something Catherine referred to, which is greatly welcomed, is one strand of the report mentions a fear of using technology. That's a challenge for all of us to overcome, not just you guys, but me and everybody else. So that's something that we will address. Another one of the learnings that we will take from the pilot. Not forgetting technology is not a panacea. I suppose it is an enabler, but it's not a panacea. And I think, you know, as we've referred to, without the interventions of Dr. Edna Harkin, Niall Kennedy, Cara Murphy, who God knows they were thrown into the deep end, did a steep learning curve, but did they stay up to the plate? Absolutely, in spades. Their engagement and support was absolutely critical. And to be honest, without them, we wouldn't be here today to discuss anything. In respect of our academic partner, what more needs to be said about Dr. Suzanne Denif? I'm forever grateful to Dr. Mark White for pointing me in her direction. I think Suzanne captured the very essence of what we set out to achieve in her report. And I think it's a superb piece of work. Just as an aside, we've already had some requests for information from Denmark, from Spain, and from the UK. So I think this report will go far and wide. People are interested to see how we successfully deployed it, never mind being a pandemic, but how we actually engaged, how we recruited. And that's always a challenge for projects. As I keep referring to it, I think it's a proof of concept in an early setting. From my own perspective, I'd like to thank Claire McQuillan, Dawn Watson, Helena and Niall from my own office for their outstanding work and contribution in what was a challenging time for all of us. The learnings we have implemented, I think, The full extent of what our technology can offer will be further explored with Doyle and our colleagues in phase 2, and that we can capture and reduce to 42% by a significant figure who made the recommendations as to what improvements they would make. And I suppose finally, on a very somber note, I'd like to pay tribute to a colleague of mine today who sadly passed away on Tuesday and was buried this morning. She would have played a role in the triage of some of these patients in the project, and her untimely passing has robbed us of someone taken far before too early, and someone who captured the very heart of what it means to be treating someone like you'd like to treat yourself. Angela, you will be sorely missed. Thank you.
Thank you, James, and thanks for the tribute to Angela. I know it's been a very, very tough day for you and your colleagues, and she was such a critical role of the triage, and just like to thank you for saying that and acknowledge Angela today, and our deepest sympathies to Angela's family today. Thank you, James. So to officially launch this report, we are delighted to have Minister Mary Butler. Minister is obviously the Minister for Older Persons, but she's also, her constituency is in the Southeast, so it's very, very relevant that she's the person that's launching this. Obviously, she couldn't be here physically today, so we're delighted to bring her in remotely to launch our report today. So welcome, Minister Butler.
Dear Gwit, it gives me great pleasure to launch the research findings from this Telehealth Initiative, which is an innovative partnership between Wexford County Council's Age-Friendly Programme, the HSE's Integrated Care Programme for Older People, Wexford General Hospital, Age-Friendly Ireland, the private sector through Turnstall, Waterford Institute of Technology, and members of the Wexford Older People's Council. The Wexford Telehealth Initiative demonstrates how health services can be delivered through assistive technologies for the benefit of older people. Telehealth has huge potential to transform how health services are provided by bringing care and medical attention directly into the home. The government's policy goal is to support older people to remain living independently in their own homes and communities for longer, in line with the Sláinte Care vision for receiving the right care in the right place and at the right time. This is reflected in the ongoing work to develop a statutory scheme for the financing and regulation of home support. Funding has been allocated to recruit 130 posts to support the national rollout of Interi as the standard assessment tool for care. A national home support office is in the process of being established, and a home support pilot commenced last month in one site, with other pilot sites to be fully operational by January of 2022. Furthermore, between 2020 and 2021, there has been a significant increase of 2.5 million hours in the number of home support hours delivered nationwide through additional investment. With a rapidly increasing population of older adults in Ireland, the enhancement of community supports and health interventions that will enable the realisation of care as close to home as possible has never been so important. This has been further highlighted throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, which has shown us the benefits of such an approach. As Minister, I am committed to maximising the use of virtual and telehealth services to enhance access to supports for individuals and their families. This government's programme for government commits to the vision of creating an age-friendly Ireland. Our national age-friendly programme, managed by the local government sector, has achieved remarkable results in just over a decade, and Ireland is now acknowledged as the first age-friendly country in the world by the World Health Organization. I want to personally acknowledge the work of Chief Executive Tom Enright for his leadership of the Wexford Age Friendly Programme, a Dungarvan man. Under the housing options of our ageing population policy document, one of the 6 overarching principles relates to the use of assistive technologies being a critical intervention in supporting older people to remain at home. I am pleased to say that significant progress has been made on implementing the actions in the Housing Options Policy Statement. The recently launched Age Friendly Homes website will be an invaluable resource for older people and has a dedicated section for technology that supports ageing in place. Age Friendly Ireland is also continuing to engage with a range of service providers to identify new technology supports for older people. The Department of Health is committed to supporting e-health and the increased use of assistive technologies in the coming years, and will work with all stakeholders to advance this fundamental goal. I would like to acknowledge the work of Professor Martin Curley and his team in the HSE, who are leading the digital transformation of Ireland's health service. This transformation will involve the rapid adoption of e-health technologies, creating vital improvements in health service efficiency, effectiveness, and experience for healthcare professionals and service users. The increasing interest in using telehealth in chronic disease management comes from a recognition that, as the population ages, telehealth can contribute significantly to more proactive, preventative, and person-centred care, reducing costs, improving outcomes, and enhancing the individual's experience. It must also be noted that the way older adults use technology is changing. Historically, the digital divide has affected how older adults use new technology. However, the COVID-19 pandemic has, out of necessity, seen an increased use of technology in society and in healthcare. A report undertaken by the ESRI recommended that supporting digital health literacy and capability among older people is absolutely essential. This Wexford pilot telehealth project has been extremely timely, both in the context of our ageing population, but also in the COVID context. The move to phase 2 of the telehealth project and its expansion to other countries is an indication of its success. I would like to compliment the Wexford Age Friendly programme for demonstrating leadership with this innovative initiative and for working so constructively in partnership with the Integrated Care Programme and other stakeholders. I am aware that all of Age Friendly Ireland's work is informed by the voices of older people through the Older People's Councils. I would like to commend the Wexford Older People's Council, along with other partners on the Alliance, for their efforts in making Wexford a great county in which to grow old. In conclusion, I am delighted to have the opportunity to launch this important report on phase 1 of the telehealth programme, and I look forward to watching the progress of phase 2. Gorv Mahagut.
Thank you, Minister Butler. And likewise, I think Minister Butler is one of the hardest working ministers that we've ever had looking after older people, and has made herself hugely accessible to the Age Friendly programme and in particular to older people. So we're really, really thankful, Minister Butler, for launching this report. And likewise, we look forward to phase 2 and progress in phase 2 with all our colleagues. So we've come to the end. We've officially launched our report. This is only the start. We want to go to phase 2. I certainly look forward to working with all my colleagues in Wexford and the surrounding counties to progress all the opportunities that phase 2 is going to present to us. In conclusion, I don't want to name everybody that we've mentioned again today, just to say all of our speakers, all of the participants in the steering committee, our Older People's Council, and in particular, all the patients that participated in this, because if we not had their participation, we wouldn't have this data in which to enable us to go forward. So thank you all to all our online attendees, to all our speakers, and to everybody who joined in us today. Thank you very much.